participate because I didn't want to break in. It was almost like there were two rooms. So I just suggest that maybe at some point you want to pause and allow them to speak. Maybe you did that last time.
Yeah, I'll see if
But
I can.
you do kind of feel like you're on a balcony looking down.
Right.
And you don't
Well,
want to
the
see.
problem is not being able to see who's if anybody's waving their hand or anything, you know.
Yes.
So I'll watch.
Well, and
Or just to pause every once in a while and say, hey, peanut gallery. I mean,
please help me to do that. I'm totally incompetent when it comes to technological things and managing a group that's not all present in the same place. So how do we do that?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't mean it as a criticism.
I'll
It's
watch.
just-
I think it's a very good possibility.
Come on in.
We've been waiting for.
2 C's.
We're up there.
Sorry, another thing.
Oh, 2 seats right there.
You're great. Thank you so much.
Do you have the poems?
I've got everything. I've got the study. I've done all my study on them. I've done a thesis, you know how it is.
It's no poetry slam.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, we were not even.
You're just chatting.
I was just checking. Great.
Not even beginning, but, well, here, thank you all. Sure. Any business left over from previous sessions? Further thoughts on poems? I thought it would be fun today. Rather than start by inviting someone to share a poem that they liked particularly, but to ask if someone would be willing to share one of the poems that was most puzzling or most difficult, or left you sort of high and dry.
Yeah.
And I invite you to do that.
There's definitely E.E. Cummings. I've always had difficulty with E.E. Cummings.
You're a little bit ahead of us, I think.
Oh, I thought you're not asking about the poems for this week?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're in the third week.
third week.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Is it the one?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I see. They're different piles.
Yeah.
It's the same question next week.
Oh, gorgeous.
I'll be very happy to turn in the comments right now.
Oh, yeah. That'd be fascinating.
My goodness, what are those notes you
I know, I've got lots of
nice. Thank you.
So how does it feel for someone to say, come on, and they shut you down, just. Are you really feeling comfortable?
No, I just didn't read that. I mean, the date's right there.
Yeah, don't worry.
Well, same question for this week, is there a poem that someone found just puzzling, or?
Well, you know, oh, sorry to interrupt, but you know what? The hidden name, of course, is very could be puzzling. You know, it could be because I write poetry, so I've written hundreds of poems, and so I look for repetition. I look for some hidden thing or some word that makes sense for the whole poem. So that makes sense because I can just find words to create the meaning of it. And that's the hidden name, which is a lovely poem.
It's wonderful. Would you like to say more?
Oh, more. I didn't want to say too much because I don't want to hog the scene.
We got plenty.
It's okay. It's all right. It's like keep on going or stop. I can stop anytime. But I did like it. But I sort of joined it up. What I did was I joined up all the poems and I made a poem out of all the poems. And so, and so they all add up to something that you're most probably wanting us to see.
Theme.
Yeah, a theme, yeah. And so, of course, this poem has the word heart in it, which is like so important to see, because if you didn't have that in, maybe you wouldn't understand it as well. You know, like this sort of seems to be a poem that's showing you that knowledge won't give you it all. Running the gauntlet will. You know, opening your heart is what this poem is about, in order to not to have knowledge, but to understand.
Interesting. Well, would you be willing to read the poem? I think poems are best experienced,
Yes.
not read as though this were a piece of text from which we were to draw some content,
Yeah.
but rather it's a song that needs to be sung and shared. Would you be willing to
Oh, I
read the
don't
poem
know. That's okay.
to exemplify the sense of the poem?
All right. So I'll just read. So, so hidden name. The true name is not the one that gilds portals, illustrates proceedings, nor the one the populace choose with vexation. The true name is not to be read in the palace itself, nor in gardens or grottos, but remains hidden in the waters under an aqueduct I drink from. Only when there is great drought, when frost-bound winter crackles, when springs at their lowest ebb spiral in shells if ice, or it should be of ice most probably, when the void gapes underground in the heart's cavern, where blood itself has ceased to flow, under the vault, now accessible, the name can be received. But let the hard waters melt, let life overflow, let the devastating torrent surge rather than knowledge.
No, thank you. That was very good. Much better than
Thank you,
reading.
Lynn, you're absolutely right. Betsy and I proofread these little booklets over and over and over again, and we were, of course, certain that one or two typos was getting through, and you know.
And maybe it is if ice. I mean, sometimes the grammar is non sequitur. in these poems.
I just found it the other day and he went and looked and said, well, you're right, it's all here.
Right. So please share again your sense that you're reading of this.
My sense of it is that the heart needs to be open. In this, you need to be like run red raw in order to know. It's not knowledge; it's a heart knowledge. So it's a heart knowing, but it's not knowledge that you know, head knowledge. Yeah. So by opening the heart, by opening the floodgates, then you'll have the answer. That's sort of the thing that, and you do need to run this raw gauntlet in order to have your heart open to the answer, which is the name.
Excellent. Well, I know this poem. Don't let this just become a dialogue between you.
I'm going to stop.
I'd like
Sooner or later, we're gonna get to George Griffin, so.
I can stop anytime.
Oh, no, I really want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit further.
Oh, interesting.
I quite agree. And as I read this, the sort of, I would use a little different language, the sort of catastrophic events of life.
Yeah.
Your expression was sort of a law events that lay bare. Those are the occasions when we can, when the name becomes accessible. We read, our readings are very similar to that. I saw this as really a poem in 3 stanzas, although it's printed as a single block of text. The first 2 lines, which are the first 2 little paragraphs, I read as the first stanza. The second 2 as the second stanza. And, I think the sense of the first stanza is the name is hidden. The sense of the second stanza, the second set of two lines is that it becomes accessible really during those catastrophic events that just lay bare the void, either of the world or your soul, however you choose to read it. But the third stanza, which is just the last line, I read as, but let the hard waters melt. You see, it's the ice and the sort of the bitterness of the winter that lays the name there. But interestingly, the poet goes into the subjunctive. I get a bit bookish here. He goes into the subjunctive mood in the last line. No longer is he speaking the indicative, but so this is sort of a wish or a desire. Let the hard waters melt. Let life overflow. Let the devastating current surge. So the bitter cold which laid bare the void. The poet desires that the waters melt. Let the water come back and cover the void. Rather than knowledge, my sense is that the word, and I have one more thing to say about this, which I haven't said yet, but the word is so full, such an awesome experience that it's terrible. I think of is it Rudolph Alter Henry who spoke about the experience of the holy as being both one that attracts you and pulls you, but is so terrible it repels you and frightens you. So there's that double action when one approaches the holy, which is near the holy. And the holy is a dangerous place to be. The children of Israel were forbidden even to set foot on the verge of the Mount Sinai where they would die. And so I have the sense that the poet is saying, don't go there. It's too awful to survive. The thing that I have not up to this point said, and I'm glad you're here because you did such people I never did.
Okay,
I snuck through one brood but my sense is that and my experience is that in many Jewish prayer books where the name of God might appear, there is substituted the word Shem, which is the name. Is that correct?
Hashem is the name, and it is often substituted. I don't know if it's in prayer books, but it could be.
Well, I had a Jewish neighbor in Columbus, and we spent about a year going out and eating, having coffee and donuts together. Except he was one of these healthiest. He had fruit juice and unflavored yogurt or something. But anyway, we'd have these times together, and they grew out of a little conversation when he and I said, he said, if I wanted to teach someone about Judaism, I would begin with the prayers of our prayer. And I said, dang, if I wanted to teach someone about Christianity, I think I would begin with the prayers in our prayer. So we began meeting together, sharing our prayer, and that's where I discovered he was Orthodox, and I forget the name of the prayer book.
Siddur.
But in that case, Hashem was always that's not
Yeah,
the other alternatives, but simply the name. Because it was too sacred to pronounce.
right. I think certainly the Torah that I have that has also the other readings that they do. I don't know whether I don't think it's been substituted in Hebrew. I'll have to go back and look. But every time it's translated into English, it's the eternal one. That is rather than say God or Adonai or the Lord or anything, it's the eternal is how that particular translation works.
And I understand from my buddy that different groups within Judaism and even different congregations within those groups select prayer books, each of which treats this question in its own way. But in any event, that came to my mind immediately. And I determined that this was a poem about whether or not to come too close to the sacred, to the holy. Not to me.
Oh, okay, I can keep on talking, it's great. But so I also looked at the one word drought, and it reminded me of the desert mothers and fathers and all that business, and I thought you need to go through the drought, but the drought is not like peaceful. The drought is not, the desert mothers and fathers didn't have peace because they were in the desert. They went through an experience. So it could have been a hard experience in their hearts. And so the drought I found was a very important word in that poem as well. Because it seems like it's the experience, which is the thing. And it's really interesting that you say the name, because you don't have to have a name. God can be not a name. But God can be a name. So that's interesting that he repeats name, which is very interesting to go along with that. But drought is very important for me in the poem too, because it speaks of experience and the desert mothers and fathers and what happened with them. And that experience, going through an experience, not just having a peaceful time, sitting back in the desert and saying, I'm here, this is great, I can just have peace now. It's not peace, it's the experience, which could be hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that in the poem as well. For me, because you see, everybody experiences a poem differently. I know I read out a poem once years ago and to a whole group of people, and it was about something, but different from this person that rushed up to me and said, thank you so much. She thought it was about birth. It wasn't, it was about death. But she got so much. It was
Preachers have that problem all the time.
gorgeous. But I said, I didn't say a word. I said, I'm so pleased. And she said, thank you, thank you. And I said, that's fine. It's lovely. I'm so pleased. And I didn't say a word because it was so important for her. So I get this out of this, and it might be important for me, but somebody else will get something else, and they'll go, oh, thank goodness I've read that, because that's really just right for me, and it's a different thing for them.
Well, and it's a point we tried to make early on in our sessions is that there's not a correct reading. It's our reading. And
Yes, yes.
I had a colleague whose expression was, these are our poems, meaning there's not a sort of authorized version with a commentary that says this is exactly what it means. It is the sense of the poem grows out of what the author brings and what the reader brings, and the reader brings one's own experience, which is conditioned by time and situation and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
And indeed, I think the birth-death question is a very interesting one, because in our Christian theology, death is a birth. And so I think she may have been onto something.
She was.
Do you know anything about this poet, Victor Segalin?
No, I don't, and I don't even know if he's Jewish or not.
See, it would be interesting to know if he was Jewish,
I-
because that used to be name.
I was at home and I Googled,
You did.
I Googled him and there's
There's nothing on him.
not very much. He's French,
Wow.
but beyond that, I came up
Hmm,
empty.
interesting.
Yeah,
Where'd you find the poem?
well, if
Or why
you-
did you choose it?
who has there's a book, these little obscure things in the parentheses at the end, key to a bibliography, which is on the last page of the first week. And BB is, I forget, it's
Really bright, an anthology of sacred poetry.
Oh,
I just happen to know that.
I guess I should ask, why did you choose this one?
yeah.
this poem.
Yeah,
Mm,
Well,
or is that giving too much away?
no, it's not. No, the reason I hesitate is I need to know your name.
Celeste.
Cindy?
No, Celeste, it means heaven, you know.
Oh,
Celeste.
Celeste. Thank you.
That's an easy
Um,
to-
No, Celeste mentioned that she read all the poems as a whole.
Yeah,
I think, and that you, in one sense, you wanted to read them all as a single poem, and you found themes that brought them together.
indeed, yeah.
I selected poems each week that were loosely related, even in the most superficial way sometimes, with the readings for the Sunday. And so the readings this week are the children of Israel being grumpy with Moses because they were thirsty, and so we have Meribah and Massa dispute and complaint as place names as a result of that. We knew a deacon, woman deacon, who's in Columbus, whose name was Meribah. I wonder what her parents. I've got to wonder where she came
Oh, man.
from.
Wow.
Psalm 95, which is one of the readings, and I did select the psalm in a number of the cases because it was a great poem. But it obviously was selected in the lectionary this week because of its reference to that Exodus story. And the gospel is from John, and it's the story of the woman at the Samaritan well and living water, and so you'll find certain themes. Now I must confess, I began working on this way back. When did you first ask me? I can't recall it. But I started working way back.
You read a lot of poems.
What?
So you read a lot of poems.
Yeah, I've read a lot of poems. Which is good.
Right.
But then I sometimes I look at these little booklets and I say, why did I select that? Well, I think I selected this one just to answer the question of the image of the names remaining hidden beneath the waters of an aqueduct from which I drink. And that was the sense of somehow the ground of all being, this unnameable, ineffable, unapproachable fact of being itself, was imaged as water, which is life-giving to me. And I thought, oh, there's living water, I'll take that home. So just the fact.
So second one, just, he was a French naval doctor,
Wow.
an ethnographer, archaeologist, writer, poet, explorer, art theorist, linguist, and literary critic.
And he hung out with Gauguin, didn't he?
Yeah. And
This guy is a crazy guy, but we really don't know
right,
too much about him.
he died, this is great, he died by accident in a forest in Hugot, northern Brittany under mysterious circumstances, and reputedly with an open copy of Hamlet by his side.
Oh,
So
Last for you.
just live with that for the rest of the day. Or we can talk about a different poem.
Just can't make this stuff up.
Well, I'm mindful of your suggestion. Should we ask if there's anyone who wants?
Well, Andy's, I don't know if Andy's,
Oh, yeah.
Andy has gone off of.
There he
There
is. He was just hiding.
Yeah, you're muted, Andy. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm still here. I just was getting a bite and I didn't want to be eating in front of you, so I'm listening.
Can you hear us?
I can, yes.
And any comments that you want to make or thoughts?
Particularly,
No, really.
and I do enjoy listening to the comments about the hidden name. There's a whole lot more hidden there than I got out of it, so that's great.
Okay.
So
Brought the record to his knees.
Trying to turn this up, see if I can turn it up a bit. No, it's up all the way.
okay,
Good to see you, Andy. And Andy and I knew each other in Columbus, really, in adjacent parishes.
yeah.
Small world.
Yes.
It is, it is. I came out here seeking anonymity, and guess what?
I think it usually happens that way, doesn't it? What do you run from?
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. We spent the whole first half of our time on a single poem, but boy, it's a good poem, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, thank you so much for. So,
Oh, that's okay.
who's next? What's next? We wanted to do George.
Yeah, I just love this poem.
Right.
It doesn't disturb me. It wasn't hard, but I just, love bade me welcome. Yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin, but quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. The guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind and grateful. Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes? But I. Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. I love her.
It's a very good one.
And it's so evocative in so many different ways. I could imagine that there would be some schools in the South that would say you can't have that book in the library.
I read sometime recently about a parent who, or somebody anyway, wanted the Bible out, not for political correctness, but because there were these gruesome, lewd, lascivious passages in it.
So yeah, Susan, my wife, tells the story that she went to a Baptist church growing up, and so her parents wouldn't let her take any books in or anything like that. So the only thing that she could read was the Bible. And she said, if they knew what I was reading, they wouldn't let me read it. because she wasn't limited to Romans and Proverbs.
It was really funny, but the Song of Songs was just all dog-eared and gray. Arise.
Yeah, and if you maybe people don't know that there were more commentaries written on the Song of Songs in medieval period than any other book of the Bible. That was the one that everybody was writing commentaries on.
Why does this not surprise me?
I think the more you deprave, the more you attract.
Oh, absolutely.
I saw a picture this morning in the news at a bookstore in Raleigh. And it had a big sign saying, we sell banned books. And I'm wondering, what a great advertisement. What's with these banned books? What's
Well, I agree. I could spend an entire lifetime reading George Herbert. Just wonderful. I selected this Herbert poem and wanted to pair it with the Emily Dickinson. They're both dialogue poems, and both are discussions between a gracious host and who's trying to persuade the guest that you really are welcome. I really do want you here. But the guest is always reluctant and holds back. Gosh, that has a familiar ring about it for me. But I also wanted to put them together because I thought the Emily Dickinson one is such fun. She deals with some of the most profound matters. I mean, this is nothing less than salvation. And she does it in the most almost frivolous ways. I love this. Unto me, I do not know you. So Jesus says, unto me, she's like, I don't even know you. Where may be your house? I am Jesus, late of Judea, now of paradise. Wagons have you to convey me? This is far from thence. Arms of mine, sufficient Phaeton, trust omnipotence. I am spotted. I am pardoned. I am small. The least is esteemed in heaven, the chiefest. Occupy my house. It's interesting. In both these poems, there is a dialogue, and then at the very end, I don't mean to ride the grammatical horse, but too hard, but I do notice these things. In the end, the verb changes from just the indicative of the dialogue to the imperative. And finally, divine grace is impatient and says, I'm done trying to invite you. Occupy my house, get in here. Or in the case of Herbert, okay, now you've come in, but you want to come as a servant, not as a guest. But I'm telling you, sit down and eat the meal. You're my guest. And I just wonder how often God puts before us, one invitation after another, and for whatever reason, we hold back. We're like Herbert's, yet my soul drew back. I'm not worthy. The host says, just sit down, have some food, join the party, will you? I just love the sort of the way in which these maybe have I just reeled too much about my own spiritual troubles? But
I must say that I sort of got the same thing, and so because I ended up making a poem by mistake out of the whole lot, but what I got was, sit, commune, because he's saying eat my, and so he's inviting, as you were saying, inviting the person to sit and eat with him, like communing. And so I just got the word commune, so I thought sit, commune.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's entirely appropriate, that there's a Eucharistic undertone
It is.
in that poem. And yeah.
To your point about, God putting things in front of us all the time. I took a class on Paul Edward Hobbes, who was a New Testament scholar, who ended up teaching at Wellesley. He was at CDSP for a while, and then he was quoted as not believing in the physical resurrection of Jesus, and that upset the donors, so he had to leave. But he said, Paul basically says to people that Paul represents God as saying, I got some bad news and I've got some good news. Bad news is you're all going to hell. Good news is you don't have to if you don't want to. You know, and so that we have to want that, you know, and that the offer is always there. But so many of us don't take it. And we would rather live in hell in that regard. You know? And that was interesting, shocked most of the seminarians. Oh, I never thought about that.
That's interesting way of thinking.
I just, I had a question. I just like the line, the wagon have you to convey me. This is far from that. I don't know why that stuck out to me. It's just, it seemed like so far away. You needed wagons to convey me from there, from here to there, you know, just to get to you. I don't know, that just talk about what strikes you from reading the poem, and that imagery of wagons to convey, you know, as far from thence, just seemed like a large gap to in between God and her, I guess.
I like, yeah. Yeah, she says wagon, and then Jesus says phaeton. And phaeton is really, it's an elegant passenger carriage, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Emily Dickinson, the speaker, I guess I should say in the poem, not Emily Dickinson, but the speaker says wagon. Yeah, it seems like a kind of a coarse farm vehicle. And he says, I'm sending you the Lincoln Continental.
And then the next line, trust.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my goodness, Emily Dickinson does such interesting things with rhythm and meter and rhyme and you could love a poem of hers and not have a clue what it means, but just the sound of it would be exquisite, just wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Andy, that's great. Next up, anybody?
Well, speaking of meter, rhyme, and the structure of poetry, I confess I know nothing about poetry. But what came out really strong to me is the 5 songs here, where I see a structure here, where we have first forgive the silence that answers prayer, and then for the next 4. So there's 4 of these stanzas that have that subordinate phrase that and qualifies it. And then there's a shift that goes halfway through to pardon the delay of revelation, then ask the pardon for revealing your impatience. So it's almost like a fractal to me, where you have this overall structure where this is one rule and then it shifts to a different rule of grammar. But it's not just a mechanical way of writing a poem. There's some meaning behind that structure. So it causes me to pause and ask, well, why did Mark Jarman write the poem this way? It's obviously some discernment here. And I think, and maybe this is where the folks that are more familiar with poetry can enlighten me, but it seems like that there's a preamble and then there's the message. So the first half of it with the subordinate phrases is the preamble, the setup, and then we get to the meaning of it. I'll just put that out and see if there's any comments.
I think you reacted to precisely the same structural design that attracts appeals to me in this poem. I'd love to spill my thoughts on this, but others go first.
So this was the second of 5 songs. Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
I might make one more comment because I've got to go to singing practice because I'm in the praise
You're
and
not
song.
allowed. You're here.
Better tell Connie. I can see if I can relax then. So I'll have my say and then I'll scoot. to the
Well,
next
scoot
thing.
back next week. Thank you so much for your contributions.
Don't worry, I'll contribute to this one and then I'll go. But yes, that's right. It's interesting how you get things because it is moving on to something. So I feel that it's saying silence. Let go of your feelings. Be still, even without a word for God. And so I got be still as what he's trying to say, because when you're being still, then you receive, and you don't have to have the name God, but you will receive the Spirit. So being still is the opening of the door to the Spirit. That's what I got. So it's interesting. And everyone gets something different, but it's all sort of similar to what you said in a way, because it's moving towards the deeper meanings. So, and I love it. And thank you so much for listening to me. And I hope I haven't hogged the scene, but I must go to Connie.
See you next time. Yeah, don't upset Connie.
No, listen.
The quick getaway, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but I'd be interested in seeing your prayer or your poem. You wrote, trying to tie things
I'll
together.
just read it. I'll just read it right now. It's it's very simple because the words I've said, they all come together. So if there are 7 poems, so, and this is I was just putting the meanings down. And so this is how I've got it. It goes, this is the 7 poems. So each word is a poem. Listen, all welcome, sit, commune, praise together. God above all, open the heart, be still. And they're the words that I got from each poem. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
there you go. Sorry to want to hog the scene, but
No.
I just thought I loved all the poems you had, and I thought, oh, look at all this. This is the meaning. Oh my heavens. I loved it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, wifey. Oh, it's your water there.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
I was,
No, thank you.
you're taking him away?
I'm taking him away. The next.
You can stay. You're not saying anything.
Thank you.
One of the things when I was doing the class on Leviticus, and reading this book by Aviva Zornberg, was commentary by this Orthodox woman scholar.
Right, yeah.
And I don't know if it was in the book or in an interview that I heard with her, but the word that we translate Yahweh, this Hebrew word that no one knows what it means. We throw on different vowels to these consonants that in this particular prayer book, they may have taken out and put in Hashem. I'm just sort of going back to this, the name thing, but also then ask God to forgive the betrayal of language. The last line of this, this particular number 2 of 5 songs. And then troping off of the true name, that down at the, that all this torrent surge rather than knowledge. One of the things that at least she points out is that if the name of God, if everybody demands God's name and God's name is, I'll be whatever I will be. There's no pinning that down. You want me to be this, I'll be something else. I'm always going to be way beyond you, way ahead of you, all this other kind of stuff. So, so as soon as we start trying to pin it down, then God betrays that language. That the true name is not one that gilds portals. It's not to be read. So it just let this devastating surge be there rather than knowledge, that absolute knowledge of what that true name might be. And so I was just thinking about that with Zornberg's. Oh, you're never going to get it, so just forget about it. And we'll just call it Hashem, or you can call it, but it's not enough. It's not good enough, because language will always betray.
I I'm surprised when I read these little booklets again. One surprise is I do sometimes scratch my head and wonder why I selected a poem. How did I get from the readings for the week to choosing this poem? And but the other is, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because if you select poems because there's some underlying connection that at least you see with the readings for the week, you shouldn't be surprised that all of a sudden these poems begin to be commentaries on each other. And there's a deep, I'm just stunned as I read through these, the way these poems speak to each other, which astounds me. I read this number 2 of the 5 Psalms in a little different way, but building off Celeste's, I think it was Celeste before she said, said that there's that sort of parallel structure. The first line of each of these stanzas makes a statement, and then the second line says, then.
Was that your?
Yeah, Mark's structure. Yeah.
Oh, it was you, okay.
That,
Yeah.
right, it's a subordinate.
Yeah, thank you. I read this a little differently, and this comes out of my own spiritual journey, I guess. Part of my life work is that I have had to forgive 3 major players in my life. The first player is my father, because somewhere along the line, you know, when you're a kid, your father is omnipotent. He's power, he's the provider, he takes care of you. He's all of a sudden I found that my father was finite and not infinite, and that he had clay feet. And so my first struggle was to forgive my father for being my father. And my second struggle has been to forgive God for being God. Because God just doesn't line up nicely behind my expectations and demands and requests and desires. And so I think it's a genuine, for me anyway, it's been a genuine spiritual urgency to forgive God for being God. And the third is to forgive myself for being myself. And none of those has been particularly easy to do. But I find that all came back up inside me when I read this poem. Because I see these kind of the parallel structure in each of these stanzas. First, forgive the silence that answers prayer. That's sort of forgiving God. You know, I shoot these prayers up. So I have to forgive the silence that answers prayer. Then forgive the prayer that stains the silence. You know, am I enough of a human being to forgive myself for tarnishing the divine silence by shooting up my little 2-bit prayers? And I find that kind of couplet of sense in each of these stanzas. Excuse the absence that feels like presence, the absence of God, which sometimes actually, you know, when one knows the absence, one might come close to knowing God. we so yearn for that presence, then excuse the feeling that insists on presence. I turn that back on myself, to forgive myself for demanding that God somehow be present to me. And so on down through the lines, pardon the delay. I love the pardon the delay of revelation, I'm here, how about a little revelation? Show yourself to me. Then ask pardon for revealing your impatience. Forgive God for being only a word. And I find this last one probably the most difficult of all, not in just in the sense that I'm not quite sure I know what the poet is getting at. Except that because, again, I didn't realize I was pairing this poem with the hiddenness of the name before, but when we put a name on God, as you've already suggested, Gary, then we've begun to put him in a box. And he's all, how convenient if we could put him in a box and put him on a shelf and the deal is done, Forgive God for being only a word, then ask God to forgive the betrayal of language. I read this and thought of the litany of penitence on Ash Wednesday, because that's the one place in the prayer book where confession is not just all my little nasty acts, but it gets down deeper into my pride and my arrogance and my impatience and all of those things that I think this poem, this most uncomfortable. Oh, let's get rid of this poem. Can we get the rate from the bottom of this page? It's uncomfortable. Oh, gosh.
Thank you, Jim.
It's time.
It's time. We did it.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks, Andy. We'll see ya.
Yeah. Boom.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, we have to look that way and look that way. The challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for signing in.
Sure. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
See you next week.
Yes.
Sign this up.
On the E. Cummings.
Yes, we'll be ready for you. Next week.